Hello, everyone. It's Sunday, August 4th, and you're watching another TXA market update. It's been a while since we checked in. Honestly, there hasn't been much to do in the past few weeks in terms of the crypto market. Everything pretty much was on a downward path. And if that was a surprise to you, you probably weren't reading through the members TA section in our Discord channel. I have been really busy the past couple of weeks going back to school. Those of you that don't know, most of you probably know by now, I'm a teacher. I teach elementary school special education by day, and I followed the market since 2017 by night. I also run iNodes, which is a masternode, a shared masternode platform. And so I have a lot going on, and when the market doesn't really have anything to give in terms of short-term trades to the long side or even long-term entries, the best thing to do is to take a break, study, focus on the other areas of your life that need development, and really just watch and wait. One of the hardest parts about trading and crypto, especially because it moves so fast, is when you have to wait. And unless you know how to short trade and leverage trade, which is a whole nother can of worms, when the market hits a turning down point, especially when Bitcoin hits a swing high and starts to turn back down, that's when you typically want to take profit, when you at least want your initial capital back. If your trades are up 30-40%, you either close and take your profit, or you let your capital depreciate back to about where you entered or lower. And in this case, a lot of alts went a little bit lower than the last time Bitcoin had pulled back. And we'll look at those in just a second. But if you were following the Discord channel back on July 20th, I mentioned that it would have been nice to correct this week back to 60K or so with a wick to 58K to clean up the futures gap. Now, if you haven't been watching for a while and you didn't follow a while back when we had dipped down below, we left behind a futures gap. And I've had this drawn on since we made this gap all the way back in early July, just shortly before the 20th when I had made that post. So if you're looking on the dates down below as I'm following, here's where we were 19th and 20th. So here's where we were on the 20th of July. We were popping up right there. Boop. And there's a little bit of a gap on this futures chart because the 20th was a Saturday. And it wasn't until the 21st that another candle came in. And so I made that post when Bitcoin was sticking straight up in the air. And that's often a time when a lot of people will get confused, they'll get overzealous, they will buy or buy too late on that upswing, and invariably they end up upside down in a lot of their trades. So July 20th, I was looking for 60K on Bitcoin, and really what I wanted to happen, and this is the tricky thing about markets, they never do what you want to do exactly the way you want with exactly the timing that you want. So on that occasional instance where it goes right to where you're looking for, you have to take it with a grain of salt because it's not something that anyone can really do consistently in terms of timing out exactly when a price point will be hit. There are so many variables in markets, so many players, that timing is the one thing that becomes near impossible, even if you get really good at figuring out where the market swings are likely to go. So what I wanted back on July 20th was that I wanted us to correct that week to 60K or so to clean up that futures gap. So I wanted us to come back down when we were here. And in the matter of a week or so, I wanted horrible blood, flush this out, because to me, if that was what they did, then that would give us the springboard essentially to blast off and break the top. Well, obviously that didn't happen. So I said, if it happens, we'd have better opportunities. It doesn't have to happen this way. I said the other big possibility is we pump into the Bitcoin conference that was going to come up that next week, and that will make me wonder if we sell the news after the rumor pump. Well, that's exactly what we ended up doing. So here we were July 20th, and we pulled back a little bit, and then going into the Bitcoin conference the end of that week, we pumped. And we pumped a little bit out of that resistance pattern. Now, if you had used the extremes before, it really didn't get that far from the previous extreme swing high. We really didn't break that much higher. But if you're using the tighter points of the original swing highs, it looks like a fake breakout. Now, for me, when I saw that price action coming up towards 70K, where I was watching was volume. And I knew when we hit that 70K mark, and we had no buying volume, odds are we were going to pull back. And as soon as we put in this big red candle here that you hadn't seen a long red candle on the way up like that, usually that's your hint, hey, the trend up is probably changing. That big red bearish engulfing candle, if you put 3 days in there, all three of those would bearish engulf the previous 3 days candles. So that's kind of when you start thinking, here's where we might be turning around. So when we popped back in right about here on the 24th, that's when I started looking back down here and I realized, okay, here's about 11, 12% down on Bitcoin. That means most of the alts are going to take some pretty heavy hits because chances are when Bitcoin pulls back 10 to 15%, a lot of the alt Bitcoin pairs pull back 10 to 15%. And the net result on most of your alts is a pullback of 20 to 30, sometimes more percent. Some of the alts, 50%. The alts that ran really hard, really fast during this leg, a lot of them came back and a lot of them are lower than they were. They made lower lows already on this swing and we still haven't finished it off. Technically, if you look at this area, 59,800, and you come over here to that futures chart, 59,800 is like right in the middle. It's pretty close. It's close enough that you could say, oh, we closed the gap. Now here's your problem. There's no candle on the futures chart. So even though on the main charts, yesterday, we could have closed that futures gap, the futures markets weren't open and they weren't trading. So there's no candle there. Liquidity hasn't been eased on these markets. Chances are on Monday, tomorrow, we are probably going to open somewhere down in that area. Monday, maybe it'll be Tuesday. And they don't have to go down there right now. That's the other thing that's really going to mess people up. Now that they've come down here on the main chart, but not on the futures chart, we know that that's probably the area where they're going to close that gap. And we know they haven't put it in yet. Plus, if you go and look up right now, you look up the shorts and the longs and the leverage positions in the market, chances are the shorts are over leveraged now because we've gone straight down for pretty much a week and a half now, almost 2 weeks. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay, exactly a week. I was kind of starting from the middle of the week there. So exactly a week and we're down about 13%, we peaked at about 14%. We may hit as low as 15% in the coming days. That's a pretty fast, heavy march straight down for Bitcoin. And a lot of alts felt that blood. A lot of alts took some heavy hits in that. Here's 1 inch, 30%. Here's Algo, 25%. That's about what you would expect. Cello, 23%. That means their Bitcoin pairs went down further, while Bitcoin went down 25% on Doge, on Doggy. Now you can see some of them, they haven't made lower lows yet, and therein lies the possibility to come. What's going to happen next? Well, we could get a bit of a relief bounce here. This has been pretty straight down. There's a lot of shorts sitting right around 64, 65K, probably right above that moving average area. And so there is still a chance Bitcoin could kind of make its way up, liquidate those shorts, and then come down and really push into that wick area. That gives you the setup to potentially make an inverse head and shoulders. Now, I'm drawing this out on a 4-hour chart, but this could happen on a lower time frame. It could happen very quickly. It could take days. There is no way to time it. The other option is, now that we've pretty much got here, we're almost there, we just come down and we clean it up tomorrow and Tuesday. That is my preferred option, because if we do it tomorrow and Tuesday, what's going to happen is you're going to get candles showing up down here on this chart over the next 2 days. That does two things. Number one, it closes this gap, which would be great. For the bullish scenario blowing off the top, we want this gap closed. From a CME futures perspective, that's big money, big liquidity. It needs to be handled by those money market makers so that we can go higher and not feel that pressure to come back down. The other thing it'll do is it'll create a new gap above where we are. And if that happens, that's incentive for the market makers to push us back up. That creates a new bullish trend line. That sets us up for a higher high and a potential swing to go and break the top. So there's a lot of things in the very near future coming. And the important thing for us is we need new entries for the long side for that blow off the top move. If you really want to make money in this market and you want to make a good sum of money going into next year, you're really hoping for that blow off the top move, and you're hoping to be in some of these alts that are down 70, 80, 90% off their last all-time highs. Because those are the alts, if we start a true new bull run, a new 3 impulse wave, and what is that? So here's this A, B, C, right? Big, giant one, and there's stuff in between, but that's pretty apparent for my brain. And when you start to think Elliott wave, if this is a giant 1, 2, and it doesn't need to be perfect, I can come from anywhere in there. I'm just kind of ballparking because we don't have, hindsight is 2020. We don't know. Are they going to 60K? Was that it? Are we going to 58K and closing it completely? But we'll just estimate down here at 59 because that gives us a nice even 1 at the all-time high, the previous swing high. What does that look like then? Well, the 3 wave then should blow off the top, probably blow straight past the 1.6 and check right in up to here. That's a strong possibility. If we get a massive rally, boof, something like that. Now the other option is we get to the 1.6, we get stuck, and then we pull back, and then we're going to exhaust somewhere up there and kind of do some kind of reset bear market from there, right? So ideally, this is our last higher low before we go into an impulse wave on Bitcoin. And if that's what's going to happen, then anything we can get into that's an alt that's a strong alt that has a healthy market, that's not illiquid, that is traded on major exchanges, that has seen all-time highs in the previous cycle and pulled back from them and seen a lot of buying and accumulation in that time period. We have times 5s, times 10s, times 20s, and who knows what ahead in this next impulse. So I'm very, very happy we came back to close this up. I would have liked it earlier, but the fact that we're slowing it down doesn't change the structure and the targets and the numbers for where we may be heading. So all of that in mind, let's look at some alt charts in just a minute, some potential entries, maybe where we could be getting in, where we might have already gotten in, and some of them may have already started. I don't know, I haven't dug very deeply into a lot of them yet. But before we do that, let's just check in with some of the news that's going on out there. So, of course, there's the bearish news, the Bitcoin slump down to 63, altcoins wrecked, boo hoo hoo, risk off. Everyone should be scared. So a weak jobs report also sent some other things reeling. The stock markets took some pretty heavy hits. And the worst day since 2020 COVID crash, actually, just on, I believe it was on Friday. So definitely some nastiness going on out there. Morgan Stanley's going to offer Bitcoin ETFs to wealthy clients, though, if you have over 1.5 million. So there's more money coming in. Presidential candidate Trump suggests that crypto could fix the US debt. So he has been out and appealing to the crypto scene hard and heavy over the last month or so, talking about his plans to make a strategic Bitcoin reserve, getting people that are interested in crypto, hopefully, to vote for him. That's what he's hoping for, surely. And we always have to keep in mind, we get lots of promises from presidential candidates. Doesn't mean they can do it. Trump would have to convince Congress to agree to legislation to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So keep that in mind. But those types of remarks likely led to this pump here. This type of stuff got people excited, had people buying more Bitcoin, thinking we were getting ready to go. And then here we are selling the news, because the next day almost, I believe the conference was on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then here we are on Monday, sell off. So definitely selling into that, coming back, closing the gap. And anybody who bought on that is kind of frustrated right now, down 10% or more. And the US did add more jobs. Unemployment rate shoots up to 4.3%. And now we're talking about rate cuts. So potentially in the next month or two, we could see a Fed rate cut, which could ease liquidity and possibly inject more cash into the equities and crypto markets. We'll have to see if that happens. We'll have to see how the DXY reacts as well. Here's another article about Bitcoin plunging 10% in 72 hours. And while all this is going on, gold has hit its $2,500 all-time high in history. So hopefully Bitcoin will become digital gold and follow. We also had Iran raising the red flag of revenge, and there's talk of war. And here, Senator Cynthia Lummis, it rhymes with hummus. Now the wait is over. This is our Louisiana Purchase moment. Read the text below for my Bitcoin Act. So she actually introduced legislation for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. It would establish a decentralized network of secure Bitcoin vaults operated by the Department of Treasury with statutory requirements, ensuring highest level of physical and cybersecurity for the nation's Bitcoin holdings. That's serious business. Implement a 1 million unit Bitcoin purchase program over a set period of time to acquire a total stake of approximately 5% of the total Bitcoin supply. That is nuts. Mirroring the size and scope of gold reserves held by the US, paid for by diversifying existing funds, so selling off other things to buy Bitcoin. Think about selling stocks and Bitcoin buying instead. Affirm self-custody rights of private Bitcoin holders and emphasize strategic Bitcoin reserves shall not infringe upon individual financial freedoms. So very interesting. Certainly sounds great in theory. You've got to get everyone in Congress, well, at least a majority, to approve it, a passable majority. And I mean that could pump the price up if the government starts buying, if other governments start buying, but it's not happening yet. We're not there yet. It's very exciting. I'm excited about it, and it could feed into a blow off top along the way. But the legislation hasn't passed. The elections haven't happened. So now that we've pulled back, it may be a while. We may sit down here for a little while. We don't have to get going tomorrow. It could take the whole month of August to churn around in this area, really melt some alts down, really force some people to panic sell so these big players can accumulate. I mean, think about it. Morgan Stanley decided to offer Bitcoin to wealthy clients, and they get a chance at it 10% off right after the US announced it as potential strategic Bitcoin reserve, plans in legislation. There are too many things for us to not consider that it may not be coincidence that Bitcoin is on sale when some of the wealthiest clients that Morgan Stanley has can buy it. And this kind of a push down provides liquidity for people who want to enter without shooting price up over the top. It also allows over-the-counter markets to acquire Bitcoin at lower prices, and all kinds of things. So freed up liquidity. Now, if this were the turning point right now, if we were going to go back up, you should see some buying volume. I mean, if you look down here when you hit a turn, here's a peak of buying volume. Here's a turn, here's a peak of buying volume. Even on the lower swings internally, there's peaks of buying volume. Nothing yet. There are no peaks of buying volume yet. And until that happens, chances are we're going to sit around in here and kind of play around, and we may hook some shorts and bounce somewhere in this area. We've done this before. So if you're kind of wondering what this could look like, here's a good example, because we were just in this area, right? So here we are coming down. If that was the drop, it didn't go as far. We didn't have a wick, but we could churn sideways for about a month. We could pop up and we could come back down and then make our much lower low. But ideally, we don't make that much of a lower low. Ideally, we churn around, we come down, and we get stuck, and we make a higher low this time. A strong higher low with buying volume would signal this downward trend is now over. We're changing direction. Okay, so this would also give us a chance to liquidate some shorts, this type of price action, before we get the bottom. It doesn't have to happen. We could get it quick and fierce and just bounce. Now, all of this kind of in the back of your mind, keeping all of this in your head, let's take a look at some of these charts. F is sitting at its low point. So isn't that interesting? Bitcoin did not swing as low this time around. F did. F is sitting on this 1.618 that it can't seem to break back up above. F could break down to this larger 618, another 10, 12% if Bitcoin pushes down to that 57, 58, 59K area while F Bitcoin takes another hit. Look at F Bitcoin. It gave back almost all of that ETF hype excitement. They came all the way back almost. And chances are you're going to get that last 5.7%. So if ETH Bitcoin drops another 5 to 6%, and Bitcoin drops this last 2, 3-ish percent, maybe 3.5%, ETHUSD could drop to 10%, roughly, especially with the churning and wicks and volatility. So ETH may have one more shot to break back down close to that $2,500 mark. It's already kind of below this trend line. And the last time they dipped below it, you can see they kind of churned sideways as they did it before they picked back up. So that could be, again, if you're looking for, this is not a guarantee that we repeat this type of history, but if we've done it once before, we can look at it as kind of a potential guide. That is entirely within the realm of possibility, that for the next month or two, we go sideways, Bitcoin churns around before we finally start to pick up maybe October, setting up the stage for elections going into November, and then maybe we get some kind of hype. Okay, that's totally possible. It's on there. And if ETH is looking like that, chances are our other alts are as well. The DXY, part of Bitcoin kind of theoretically swinging up is if the DXY goes down. But here you can see the DXY went down. Bitcoin's not going up. So that inverse relationship is never guaranteed. It's there a lot of the time, and then when we get breakdown moves, it falls apart. Here is the DJI. So there was kind of that wedge I was looking at. They did that fake break twice, and now they're back down in it, but it hasn't broken down completely. Here's the SPX. There's that pullback to the 200 exponential moving average. The last time they did that, they bounced. They did about a 6% and bounced. Here's another 6%. Will they bounce? We'll see. Bitcoin dominance pushing ever higher, which makes sense because if alts dipped in a larger percentage than Bitcoin, then alts market caps dipped a larger percentage relative to Bitcoin. That is a potential area for it to turn around a bit, though. Here's Coin. You can see they've kind of peaked a little bit. They made a lower high, slightly higher high, but now they're making a lower low, and they may come back all the way to this 167, especially if Bitcoin's going to continue to pull back. Robinhood, you can see broke below that moving average. Very interesting. There's a little gap there. Still wondering if they break and hook all the way back to that $12 mark. We'll see. Nvidia taking some pretty heavy hits, 25% off of its peak. But honestly, I don't understand how people think that that's a horrible thing when it's run almost 200% since the start of this year. I mean, that's healthy. That's normal. It should pull back. And if it doesn't, you should be concerned because if the correction is not behind you, chances are it's in front of you. Amazon, big gap left behind there. Now, Solana was one I've been following closely because this has been very hyped up. It's been very similar to ETH, but with Bitcoin strength. And you can see it in the structure here. Here's Bitcoin structure. There's that big pattern that we were marching down, and now we've made a higher low. Now look at Solana. Very, very similar. And you can look at Solana Bitcoin. Solana Bitcoin had a very tight, neat pattern there. It ran all the way to a 4.23, and then it came back to the 1.6 with a 15% dip. It could go a little bit lower. Solana, I was expecting to come back to get this liquidity here at 149. It's since dipped back to 141, and it could come all the way back to anywhere in these swing lows. It doesn't have to. It could have bled enough. Maybe it bounces a little bit with Bitcoin back up to here and survives sideways as Bitcoin churns around this low area for the next month or so. It's, again, you can't time these things, but you can see the confluences, and it's enough for us, if we're patient, to kind of get an idea for where we may be headed, and we just have to be patient and wait for it to get there. Now, here was 1 inch. We talked about this area. TI, I believe, put this arrow on, and there was this bit of stuck liquidity, and here they are back at this area, 29 cents. 1 inch from its swing peak is down about 60%. So that is a pretty strong pullback. Algo's down 63%. If it comes a little bit more, you could make it to 66, 65%. But that's a hefty sale. I mean, that is a nice sale. Now here's Cello. We picked it up on this bounce here somewhere around in this area. Could have sold it for 60 cents or so, depending on what your targets were, but then they came right back down to that entrance area. So you really couldn't trade any of these breakouts. If you did, you should have got stopped out, and now you should be waiting for Bitcoin to finish off the move and figure out its liquidity issues. But again, look, 75% off its all-time high. So these are now coins where you can consider a couple of options. Being so far off the all-time high, you don't have to short-term trade this one anymore. You could look at it as an investment trade into the next bull cycle. What does that mean? Well, that means instead of buying a large position, putting a 20% stop loss and waiting, you buy a small position, and if it goes lower, you dollar cost average a smaller position, a little bit at a time. Five lots, 10 lots of smaller sizes. Instead of buying $1,000 and making a trade, you buy $50, $100, $50, $100. And until that move starts to turn and pop and pull back, you're just accumulating at a low dollar cost average point. That's the smart thing to do when the market is down 70, possibly will be another 5, 10, 20%. You don't want to get in heavy, but you don't want to risk having nothing in at all. So you have to limit your risk exposure by limiting your lot size instead of using a stop loss. It's a slightly different strategy, but it's a very good one if you are expecting the market to swing back to all-time highs, especially on some of these altcoins. So here's Doge. From the last swing, Doge is down 52%. From its all-time high, we're down 85%. And this is a pretty bullish structure. I mean, you had this long-term sideways accumulation, pop up, pull back. From the swing bottom to that, you had 280%. From the peak pull back, you got 50%. If we do a retracement fibs, series of retracement fibs, we're not far off the 618. In fact, that's what they bounced off of last time. So chances are they're coming back to 9.5 cents, and that's a great place to begin accumulating some Doge. Because if they come down to 7.5, and I buy a small lot at 9.5, then I can buy a larger lot at 7.5 and pull my cost average down into this area between the 618 and the 786. Why is that a good thing? Well, if you had used that strategy here on this first move, right, coming out of the hole, if they started to pull back on you and you started dollar cost averaging in this pullback, when this move goes and they do 140% in a matter of days, that's when you get your initial capital back and you let them do all this stuff and you decide, do I take more profit on the way? Whatever, it's your choice. But when they come back again, you have your initial capital wash, rinse, repeat. So anything that I bought down in here, if I got my initial capital back, I get to more than double my position back here because I'll buy back with my initial plus whatever I saved from risk-free or the profit that I took can be rolled into it as well. But would I buy it right this second? Probably not, no. Because Bitcoin hasn't fully closed that gap. The futures chart isn't sorted. The blood is out in the streets and people are panicking and it's very volatile and it could last a month or two. So I'm not going to rush into this. Personally, I bought some Doge around this 10-cent mark, not all the way at the bottom, but when it bounced off of this and started to kind of settle sideways, I took a nibble, and when it pulled up and hit the top of this pattern, I sold. I didn't even want to risk it because I saw Bitcoin's divergence, which if you were following along in the channel, Bitcoin was diverging here around the 21st, and that's when things were getting kind of iffy. So for Doge, that was right in here, the 21st. So if you were paying attention to the Bitcoin divergence and you sold your alts from that, it was an easy take profit. I had no idea they were going to drop it that hard, that fast right after, but it worked out in our favor, worked out in my favor, and anybody else who kind of had that thought when you were following this along. This is why I'm saying be safe out there. We still have the futures gap, and it's sitting right at the 200-day EMA. If they do it, we have plenty of alt entries to nab, assuming we stall in the area. So that was my warning on the 21st that we really needed to consider this. And when they dropped and Bitcoin was bouncing, it was kind of iffy, right? Be ready for anything. Bitcoin pushing higher now locally. The dip was shut down on that news. It came in almost exactly when the selling volume started to pick up too. And then they went on to kind of push a little higher on Bitcoin, but the alt bled had already begun. And if you were paying attention to the alts while that was happening, you realized Bitcoin was probably going to turn. So here's Engine all the way back down. We try to trade in this, it got shut down. That's when you get out of the way and wait. Now that Engine's coming back to the 618 here at about 13 cents, the 786 is about 5 cents. Anywhere in there is a potential accumulation zone for the longer term swing up, but you don't want to overexpose yourself if you don't know what you're doing, because you can end up in a situation like Ergo where it just keeps going and you don't know where the bottom is. We have no way of knowing how low Ergo is going to go on this chart. Now, I could go dig into some other exchanges and probably find more history, but based on that chart alone, that I wouldn't be buying into that right now. INJ has come down 66% off of that massive swing up. It's down in this green box. It could very easily come all the way back that 44% more down to $10. And if INJ comes back to $10, that's a fantastic potential buy for the next bull run because it will have come down 80% off its all-time high. And that's a great discount if you expect it to make a new all-time high. Here's IOTX, higher low, looking more like Bitcoin than some of the other alts. So we have this kind of divergence now in the alt charts. We have these charts that are pushing down to their bottoms or to their very long time ago lows, lower lows since that last swing in Bitcoin. And then we have charts that are following Bitcoin where they're making higher lows so far. Which one would you rather get into? That's a personal choice. For me, I like when an alt pops up, shows buying, and then finds a support level. I think that that's a sign of strength going into the next bull run, that they're a little bit ahead of the game, and that if Bitcoin pulls to a lower low and they hold either a higher low or the same low, that to me is a beautiful entry point. So IOTX, I will be watching you closely. Jasmy could potentially come back to this 1 cent area if it really breaks down. It may not. It may hold itself up above 1.5 cents or so. It'll be interesting to see. We can do a retracement fib here and see they really haven't pulled back a lot from that peak there. I mean, the 618 is all the way down somewhere just under a penny. There's liquidity to clean up there. So if you're somebody that has Jasmy that got it in very low when we had done this move, and now you're sitting on massive profit, well, your pullback from the swing high is about 48%. So your dollar amount is about 48% lower than when it peaked. So you're probably like, oh, it doesn't look very good. But consider they may come down another 25 to 50%. So it may behoove you to sell a little bit of your position, keep the cash on the side, and if they come back down for you, you've got another entry to compound your earnings. Now, I wouldn't sell it all because they don't have to. They could stop right at this moving average here. They could come down only 10%, ping right here, and never go lower again. You have no way of knowing. So keep that in mind. Whatever you do, make a choice, stick with it, see how it plays out, and then learn from it. KDA, here's one that looks like hopefully it could hold. If it only goes down 10%, it could hold a massive double bottom. And with this buying peak here, this is one I would love to get in at again at 40 cents when it already swung. The last swing this one did was 400%. Now off of that swing, it's down 80%. If the next run they do this 1,000% move, it's going to be fantastic. KMD broke that trend line just slightly, but not significantly. It doesn't look too bad, and you've got massive upside potential still on this one. So a lot of these alts are in positions or close to them where you can start either taking small nibbles or looking for price targets below. Look at Link. Oh, finally coming back down off of this massive push. If they get back down into this area under $10, around 8 cents or $8, excuse me, on the top of this area, that's your massive, hopefully holding support zone. And if it does, that's your accumulation area for the next move up. Because chances are we're swinging up to that 786 or back up to the all-time high in the next run. And you've got plenty of percentage there to invest into. And this is one that you can also stake. So if they come back down here for you, you can start making little nibbles and you can stake it along the way. Loop ring dropped off the cliff and is coming all the way back down. That is scary stuff. Off of its all-time high in this chart, Whoo, 96%. Now that isn't to say they won't swing back up again, but they're going to need to show you support in the bottom before you want to go jumping into something like that. Litecoin, off of the 2021 high, we're down 84%. Off the last swing high, we're down 40%. So definitely potential upside on this one, especially if Bitcoin gets going again. But until it does, this one could make a slightly lower low down to this 236 retracement here. And that'll be very interesting. If they come all the way down to this 236, you've got some massive upside potential just to get back to the all-time high. Metal, higher low, that looks good. Will it come back to the 618 for us? If it does, it wouldn't be bad to buy. Whew, NEO, they broke out of that wedge. We talked about a potential entry. We put a huge 30% stop on it, and look at that. They may come all the way down to that, and that's the risk. When you buy into a breakout, when Bitcoin has divergence and it's the top of a swing, it's very, very difficult. Bitcoin almost has to break out, or this is invariably what's going to play out. So if you're in NEO and you bought it in way up here, you've got a choice. Do you want to hold it on and add to it in dollar cost average? Do you want to cut your loss now, take half of your potential loss, wait for it to go the rest of the way and recoup on the swing up? That's a personal choice. Chances are, if Bitcoin moves, they're probably coming down again to this $8 or so area. So be careful if you're still in any of those. Poly, they did this big inverse head and shoulders. They did the break, they did the hook. It did not hold. It didn't hold. They went below it. So now Poly is sitting right at about 20 cents. I did want to see it, though, come back to that 236. So I'm happy to see they did that. But now the question is, are they going to come all the way back down to the zero? If Bitcoin really breaks, probably not. Honestly, if they came down to just this 236 and wick below it, that would be a fantastic entry. 18 cents or so, and then you've got massive upside potential that can happen really, really quick. Power, there's your big double bottom. You came all the way up. Now you've come back quite a bit. So let's measure this out a little differently, because now we have more information. Let's check our retracement. So from here, this is probably where it should have been, but really if we honor it completely, they've already come to the 883. That's pretty hefty. And if they come all the way back down to the bottom, then you don't know if they're going to hold it or if they're going to break it. But I do like that they've made a slightly, they're not making a lower low yet. There's a bit of a percentage down there to the 833. If they come back to this 15% mark, that's a fantastic entry for a coin that could skyrocket. Again, kind of has a Jasmy-like setup. It just hasn't finished, and it's going a lot slower. But the potential is there. Big downward trend line. Will they find that spot, find support, and go sideways to accumulate and go back up? That's what we would really need to see. There was that potential entry. They haven't come down as much as they did on the other one, but you can see definitely they've almost come all the way back down. Sand is one of those ones that looks like it wants to make a lower low. SNX is in this swing low area, and it's breaking through. So chances are this one's headed potentially under $1 there. ADA, this is one where we talked about it was doing that kind of setup, and they broke out and they came right back down into it. So buying the breakout can be very, very difficult. That's why you usually look for the break, the hook, and the go. There was the potential there if Bitcoin was going to blow the top. It didn't. So if you're in this one, again, same choice as NEO. Do you cut it off and wait for it to go lower? That's probably what I would do, because if Bitcoin's going to drop another 10%, chances are this one's going to drop another 20 or so. It may come all the way down to this 786, and you may get Cardano again for about 30 cents. And if you do, that's just more percentage back up to the top. So we'll be watching that one as well. XYO is a new one I had been watching. I did the same kind of thing to see how it reacted if you'd taken an entry, and this one came down even harder. So this one looks like it may come down to the 786 at 0.004. But if it does that, the 786 after a swing like that, a big hefty cup, a handle should stop it like the 618, but you can get them all the way to 786 in crypto, and that's a potential 1-2 wave that could be a massive massive impulse wave with Bitcoin if it goes. And we'd be looking at this one going up to somewhere up in the dollars over time. Big time period, probably, maybe 2 cycles, but it could happen in one. You never know. There's a lot of accumulation in there. If this one comes down to 0.004, I will definitely be accumulating some of it somewhere in this area. That's my hopefully accumulating that one. Zeta is another one that I was looking at, and this one fell off the earth. It springboarded up, went up to almost $3, and then came all the way down to 44 cents. So we need to see this one kind of find a bottom and build some structure, but I'm looking at it long term. I like what the project is. And then ASM, when it was bouncing, I wanted it to come down to the 786, and it is almost there. So this one, if you can get it close to a penny, anywhere between a penny and 1.5 cents, that to me is a great buy. For this one to run even back up to 17 cents, but could keep going beyond that. So definitely a lot of potential opportunities, but right now the market is shaky. You have to let this kind of sort itself out. It's going to be very volatile, especially, look at, they're starting to go right now as we're watching it. I wasn't sure if they were going to do it yet, but look at that. That's what we wanted to see. They're pushing that lower low and they're getting down into it. Chances are they're going to settle this out over tonight going into tomorrow, and we will get that CME futures candle. So I'll leave you all with that beautiful red candle coming in. Hopefully none of you are too upside down and stressing it. If you are, feel free to reach out. We're here to help. We're not financial advisors. I won't tell you what to do with your money. I can tell you things that I do with it that I've learned from my own mistakes. And honestly, if I was upside down in this at this point, if I had bought up here and I was holding, I mean, there's not much to do. There really isn't. You almost, unless you desperately need the money and you have to sell to take it, chances are you're better off letting it go the last 15, 20%, closing it, walking away, and coming back in a few months after the swing. So there we go. Here comes Sol pushing. That's what I wanted to see too. It's probably going down to that 133 mark. It may not go quickly, but oh man, this is what I wanted. I want to see them come down and get that 4.23 to the downside. I did measure, there's a big spike of selling volume, and that was kind of the start of the potential turn. Here's where it really started to turn, but on less volume. And if you measure that first liquidity spike, they give you a pretty good set of fib series that they looked like they followed really well. Here was the 1.6 rejection. They broke through it, pulled back to the 618, really broke through. There's the break and hook of the 2.6. Down to the 3.6, now we're breaking. We may hook back to 60 before we do the final push and get the bottom, or we could just get it. That may be the last push we need. It may hold down here going until tomorrow. We'll see. Depending on what happens over the next day or two, you may get me checking in pretty quickly here in a day or two with another recording, because I really want to be there when the CME futures gap fills in and we can look at the market wide. Is Bitcoin holding support? If it is, the entries are great across the board. Let me see if some of these alts are headed down to the entries we were just talking about. While Bitcoin's doing this in real time, are we getting pushes? Yeah, look at that. Oh, there's power doing that push down with Bitcoin. Sand. I'm gonna go back to the 4 hour because we can still see this on all the 4 hours. Still not pushing lower low though. Bitcoin pushing lower. This one's not. There's Neo pushing down. Link almost a lower low. Jasmy getting down a little bit. So they're definitely, you can see the percentages coming in. They're all following Bitcoin right now. XYO holding. There's ADA starting to push lower. So be safe out there. Be smart. Don't jump into stuff while the knife is falling, unless you are 100% confident that you don't care if it takes a week or two and pushes another 10 to 20% in the process. Just take your time, study, be smart. It's not financial advice. It's just good risk management. With that, I wish you all a good couple of weeks ahead. It may be a bit volatile. That could be the push. That could be it. We may kind of ease in this area. CME futures open tomorrow. The candle shows up, and then we could bounce from there. Who knows? So we'll be here. I'll be here. if we get these entries, I will start popping charts into that TA members TA channel again with the entries that we could potentially take. Whether you want to go small and invest long term, or you want to go big and try and bounce trade, totally up to you. But I will say, if you want to do quicker, shorter bounce trades, your better bet is waiting until Bitcoin breaks out sideways and pushes up and shows support. If you're going for longer term, smaller lots where the risk is lower because your position is smaller, you could start buying any time between now and when Bitcoin starts to push this, because chances are you're dollar cost averaging and you don't mind. If it goes 10% lower, it's going to pull your average 10% lower, and that's fine. So different goals, different strategies, different approaches, but in the big picture, nothing has changed. And with that, I wish you all the best of luck. Take care. I will see you pretty soon on the TXA Market Update.